Mark, I met him as he was going to college, and wonderful family members. His mother-in-law and I used to go to some meetings. We were trying to keep the Republic even back then. So we just, I've always been able to talk with Mark. You can call him, and he can't talk about any cases, so don't worry, don't try to go there with him. But just somebody who is in support of keeping the Republic and limited government. So Mark is the Cape Girardeau County Prosecuting Attorney since 2018. Mark has been an active member of the local and state bar associations. He has served as the president of Cape Girardeau County Young Lawyers Association and a member of the Young Lawyers Section Council of the Missouri Bar. Mark was raised in Cape Girardeau. He is a graduate of Cape Central High. He attended Southeast Missouri State University, where he received his Bachelor of Science in Political Science. He received his law degree in 2012 from Southern Illinois University. During law school, Mark clerked for the Honorable Scott Lipke, Associate Circuit Judge. Most importantly, though, we always have to say this, and I can agree to this because I know his wife. Mark is married his high school sweetheart, Callie, and they now have their son, Oliver James. Gosh, he's so cute. And one daughter, newborn, Nora Lee.
Thank you.
So here we go, Mark. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
You want to stand more?
I'll stand. And that is the most important. Oh, yeah, we can do that. All right, so as she was saying, Mark Welker, I'm the Cape Girardeau County Prosecuting Attorney. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. I usually go to one of these about once a month to different organizations to speak. Can everyone hear me? Everyone in the back hear me? Perfect. Holly, yes, good seeing you. All right, so was elected in 2018 in the Republican primary. Shortly thereafter, the position was vacant. That's because Chris Limbaugh resigned to go work for Governor Parson. So it took an appointment by the governor at that time to appoint me in August. So I actually have a little bit more time than what normal people would have whenever they're elected. I started the position a little bit early. Before that, I'll back up a little bit. When do you think the first Cape Girardeau County Prosecuting Attorney was elected? Anyone know?
1896.
Anyone else?
1901.
1873.
Oh, wow.
So you were actually pretty close. The position prior to Morley Swingle was typically a 4-year term or a 2-year term. And it basically was just that. You served your time, you served one time, and they kind of just rotated amongst the attorneys in the community. It wasn't really a glamorous position. It was almost just like, it's your turn to do it, and then so on and so on, and kind of a dreaded position. So up until basically about 1987, it was basically just your turn to do it, your turn to do it. Until 1987, that's when Morley Swingle was elected to the office, and he was elected and served for, I believe it was 18 years. And that was kind of the first longtime prosecutor that we had in the county. After that, then it was Chris Limbaugh and then myself. So do you guys know kind of some former elected prosecutors to have served? Anyone can guess of any?
Anybody? Come on, somebody guess.
Larry Farrell, former U.S. attorney. There's another person that's currently in the federal courthouse that served as Cape County prosecutor. Stephen Limbaugh. So those are some important names that served as Cape County prosecutor. Of course, they only served the one term because it was, like I said, kind of a dreaded your turn and then someone else's turn. So that's kind of the history of the office. Currently, we have 8 assistant prosecutors and then myself. The office budget, so does anyone know, can you guess what the office budget is for my office? This is why I wanted to come and talk to you guys, to kind of give you an idea of what.
5 million.
No way.
5 million?
No way.
It's in the millions, 1.7 million.
Say that's 2.
1.7 million. So, of that, we have 8 assistant prosecutors and myself as the elected. Then we have 12 support staff, and then we have 1 investigator. Okay?
So it's mostly salary and benefits.
That is. A lot of that is paid to the staff. A lot of that does not go to actual supplies. We do have a lot of paper costs, but yeah. So what do we do, right? So what type of cases do you think we handle?
State law.
We file everything that is state law. Anything that's a violation of state law that's criminal would come through our office in Cape Girardeau County. We do not investigate our own crimes. We are prohibited from investigating our own crimes, but we get referred any cases inside of the jurisdiction of Cape Girardeau County, and this could be from all different types of agencies. Cape Girardeau Sheriff's Department. The biggest customer of ours is Cape Girardeau Police Department, Jackson Police Department, Highway Patrol, Delta Police. They have 1 police officer, but we do get cases from them. Then, surprisingly enough, we have a lot of cases from the Missouri Department of Conservation. So if you are fishing without a license, if you catch too many fish, if you are poaching, we get those tickets from Missouri Department of Conservation. The Department of Health and Senior Services, we will get those cases. Department of Child Support Enforcement. So, and that's just to kind of, here's an interesting one. Scott City Police. There is a portion of Scott City that lies in Cape Girardeau County.
Yes.
So that's the travel center on Nash Road. So about once every month, we will get a case that's actually in Scott City that gets referred to our office, and we will file that case. So anything in Cape Girardeau County that is a violation of state law, we can file that. Out of all those different agencies, there's many more different agencies. Randomly, I got referred a case that there was a non-compliant elevator in our county from some agency I've never even heard of in Jeff City. We didn't file it. Honestly, I threw that in the trash. But we get referred things constantly. So how many cases do you think that our office gets referred?
Per day or per year?
Per year. 4,200 cases is how many we get referred. Of that, we file close to 3,500 of those. So as you can imagine, we're reviewing cases constantly.
That's 10 a day.
There's about, and a lot of those would be routine tickets that officers would, Highway Patrol stop someone on 55, there's exceeding the speeding ticket and the speed limit. They send that over. There's not much to do other than file that, right? So there's a lot of those that are routine that we can just file. There are others, quite a bit, that we actually have to read 2-3 pages of a probable cause statement and determine what to file. So there is a lot of those as well. So to the actual investigation of cases. Like I said, we do not actually investigate cases. Those agencies are the investigative agencies. They're the ones that investigate the crimes. They don't have the authority to charge the crimes. That's our office's policy. That's what we do. They investigate, they determine what to investigate. They then collect and have a report that they send to us. Once they determine that there is enough to send to us, they will. We review that, and in there they actually put what they believe is the crime that has been committed, but that's not actually what is charged. That's not up to them, that's not up to law enforcement. So if you ever see, newspapers get it wrong all the time, that Cape Girardeau Police Department charges so-and-so with driving while intoxicated. That's not right. They will arrest someone, but they do not charge. That is up to the prosecuting attorney and their discretion of what to charge someone with. So we have the ultimate authority and discretion on what to charge someone with. And then we will then, once we determine how to charge or what to charge, there's two different ways that we can invite someone to court, okay? That can either be done by a summons, okay? And that is a routine misdemeanor. You get a speeding ticket, we'll send you a summons in the mail saying, here's your court date, okay? And that's actually what Charlene's office does a lot of those for us. She handles most of that back end stuff. And she'll go through most of that whenever she talks to you. But that's the first way is a summons, okay? That's where we determine they're not really a risk to the community. We can file that case and they can get sent as summons. What's the other way that we can file a case?
Warrant.
A warrant. Yep. That's not an invitation to court so much as a demand. You're showing up to court. And you'll see this also as a mistake, that we are the ones that issue the warrant. We don't issue warrants, okay? We request warrants from the judge, okay? We do not set bonds on warrants. We give the information to the judge. They will then set the appropriate bond amounts, okay? We do, however, we're the ones who will determine whether or not to send it by a summons or request the warrant, but it's ultimately up to the judge whether or not to sign that warrant and what to actually issue the bond amount for the warrant on. So those are the two different ways how we can initiate a case. And frequently everyone gets those steps confused on what their roles are in initiating a case. I'm going to talk a little bit about just the specific cases that involve victim crimes. My office has a full-time victim advocate. This is very important. I think that it's very important for me to convey to groups of people like you that frequently I get told, you know, what can we do more of? And I think it's important for you guys to know that there's someone in our office that you guys can talk to if you're victims of crimes. So I pulled this morning some stats that you might find interesting on cases that involve victims. So as of this morning, we have filed close to 2,000 cases. Of those, can anyone guess how many of those needed or had a victim?
1,500.
300 of them.
It was 427.
I know my court case is
It it was around 20%. So 20% of our cases had victims. And if you think about that, that's actually a pretty high number whenever, if you really dive into all the traffic cases that we filed and all the kind of just routine, like I said, catching too many fish, or those just kind of cases that there's a lot of those. So if you just took those out and kind of only work with the high-level felonies, you would probably get a really high number of those felonies, are victim crimes. So of those victim crimes, I'm gonna break it down to females and males. How many of those were females versus males? 427.
Most were female.
Not that hard.
310 were females, 89 were males. So 72% of all of our victim crimes, the victim was a female. And I would say, I didn't actually do the numbers on it, but I'm just gonna tell you the bulk of these crimes are domestic assaults. And by domestic, that's an actual definition, a legal definition, whereas the defendant and the victim either have a child in common, or they have been in a social or romantic relationship, or they live together. So by definition, they have to be one of those three, and that's the domestic assault. And so far right now, domestic assaults that we have filed has been 180 for this year. Domestic assaults can range from anywhere from an A misdemeanor. That's a range of punishment. So misdemeanors and felonies. An A misdemeanor is 1 day in jail to a year in county jail. And of course, and domestic assault in the first degree can be an A felony depending on the injuries, okay? And an A felony can be up to life in prison. So domestic assaults honestly run the gamut of sentencings. So we see all types of these. But I would say the majority, and I actually didn't run the number of these, the majority of domestic assaults that we do file are 3rd degree and 2nd degree. Do you guys know how we determine to file 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st?
If they use a
Statute.
weapon or the degree,
Depending on weapon, depending on injury,
the method of
depending on,
injuring you.
right, or depending on prior convictions. So the majority of cases that we file are the 3rd degree or 2nd degree felonies, and which would be an E felony, a range of punishment of 1 to 4 years in the Department of Corrections, or 2nd degree domestic assault, which is a D felony, up to 7 years in the Department of Corrections. So that's kind of the bulk of those cases. We did have 2 murders filed last year. Those 2 murders actually happened in the same week last year. And by last year, I'm meaning from today's date, calendar year. Those happened the week prior to Christmas. So we had one in Jackson and we had one in Cape. We do have, I believe, 5 pending in the office, but 2 actually occurred in Cape County last year. One type of case that we're seeing a rise of that prior to, and I honestly couldn't tell you when it came in, whenever it was passed, but they call it the Greitens Law. Do you know what the Greitens Law is? It's the non-consensual dissemination of private sexual images. So this would be whenever you have it's revenge porn, okay? We are seeing a lot more of these. By a lot more, meaning that we never filed these because it wasn't law. Now we're filing maybe one a month. That is the E-felony, 1 to 4 years in Department of Corrections. They do call, like I said, they call it the Greitens Law. And that was passed after his alleged actions. So the victims in our office, let's say that there's restitution that's owed on cases. We actually have a clerk in our office that is a restitution clerk. So if we have a victim that in the crime, the defendant stole $7,000 worth of items, various items. We'll make a part of the plea deal that they are, part of their probation be that they've got to return that money. Well, we collect that money and return it to the victim. As of this year, January 1 to this date, we have collected $123,000 for victims. So that's right back to the pockets of the victims. Unfortunately, if someone goes to prison, so we get this all the time. Let's say that person stole the $7,000, which would be a D felony of stealing. If they go to prison, then that victim most likely will never see that money.
That's right.
So usually what will happen is if that victim wants to see that money back, we usually will have to make a plea deal for some type of restitution as part of probation. If they go to prison, then we can't make a deal for any type of restitution. It's just how it is. We get asked that frequently, where the victim they want the defendant to go to prison. They also want their money. So we have to have that conversation with them about, you can't have both. That's not on us. It's not up to the judges. It's just the criminal justice system. So, unfortunately, that's how it is. But right now, like I said, $123,000 that we have collected for victims. Bond hearings. So we have a lovely Supreme Court in Missouri that we really don't. They have decided on their own without the legislature to enact their own rules on us. These have caused, I believe it was in 2019, and they changed the bond rules that basically required our office, judges, Charlene's office, whenever a defendant requests for their bond to be lowered, then we are shoveled back into the courtroom. This is probably created, I would say 15 to 20 plus hours a week, man hours, that we did not have prior to these rules. Typically it doesn't really change the bond amounts that we previously would have had. Luckily we've got great judges here that it doesn't really affect it. It just is time. The defendant has a right to have their bond heard. So we have to go through that. What does that mean as well for the victims? That means that we might have to have that victim come in and have that victim testify additional times if the judge wants to hear from them about why that defendant's bond shouldn't be lowered. This is, like I said, this was just the Supreme Court thinking that judges around the state are enacting bonds that defendants can't pay. So now we all have to abide by these bond rules, when in fact, I think the bonds that are set in our county are very appropriate and reasonable. There are counties and circuits that probably have abused it, not us, not our judges. So, but it forces us to abide by those. The legislature has failed to act on any of these. They could have, in the last couple of years, during their sessions, changed those rules, and they have not.
Were there any bills?
I think there have been some pre-filed, but they have not passed any. So, some other struggles that we have is that our jail population is full. We currently have, I forgot to check this morning, it hovers around 220, 240. I know that the commission, the sheriff, they're working hard to try to alleviate this problem with hopefully building a new jail. The criminal justice system is slow, very slow. The fastest a case will move from me filing a case to a guilty plea is usually probably the very fastest. Probably 4 months. So if someone is in custody, then they're just clogging up the system. We are also receiving a lot more cases from the municipalities, the cities. So the Jackson City and Cape City, they have their own prosecutor for city cases. Unfortunately, because of Ferguson, and after Ferguson, now the cities are limited on the amount of cases that they can file and the amount of money that they can bring in as revenue. It can't go beyond a certain threshold percentage-wise of their general revenue. So because of that, they have to be very careful about the amount of cases that they file. So now we get more at the county. We don't have any of those limitations. So we get a lot more cases, which means that we have more crowded people in our jail.
Is that per statute, or why is that?
Ferguson was Senate Bill, I can't remember which Senate bill it was, but that was after Ferguson. They believed that the municipalities were basically taxing their citizens through traffic courts. So they wanted to make sure that the municipalities were not just fining people for whatever and creating a new source of revenue through courts. So what they passed was that their general revenue, there's a percentage of how much they could receive through the courts. So they got to be real careful on how much they can actually get through their courts versus what they send us. And now it's just increasing more and more what we file. And we do file more and more through the city. Also, probably around 2019, the parole guidelines significantly changed. I was in private practice before becoming the elected prosecutor, which means I did criminal defense work. I knew what the parole guidelines were very well. Let's say that it was your first time in the Department of Corrections, and it's a non-violent offense. You got a 7-year sentence. Anyone guess how long you're gonna spend in the Department of Corrections?
8 to 10 months.
Year.
That's right, Your 15% of your time is gonna be spent in the Department of Corrections your first time on
Your percentage
a
goes up, you
seven-year sentence. After that, and I'm talking years, about 5 years ago, it stair-stepped, okay, it increased. After that, every time you went in, you increased your time. So it went 15, 25, 40, 50%, okay? So if you went your second time, you're gonna stay longer. Your third time, you're gonna stay longer. Now, and this is all dependent on the parole board, if it's a non-violent offense, not all, but the majority of the time, probably 90% of the time, they're spending, can anyone guess? 15% no matter what. If it's your 8th time on a drug offense, you're spending 15% of that time in the Department of Corrections. So what we're seeing is the maximum on a D felony possession of controlled substance, which is probably what we receive the most of on a specific type of case. The range of punishment of that is 1 to 7 years in the Department of Corrections. If they get the maximum 7-year sentence, even if it's their 8th time going to prison, they're gonna spend less than a year.
Isn't there a habitual offender
Prior
status?
persistent.
There's prior and persistent that we can elevate, but
That's only 10 years.
I mean, yeah, it's unlikely that, okay, let's say we bump it up to 10 years, you're adding a month. So, it doesn't really affect it that much, okay? What we're seeing more and more of is that instead of people in prison, they're spending that time in our county jails, because once they get out, once they're paroled out, they're back in the community. They're not going and getting jobs, they're not going and being great citizens. Parole, it's a lot easier being on parole than it is probation. You just have to call in to your parole officer about once a month and just say, yeah, I'm doing great. And they're just basically committing new crimes.
Yep.
The parole board will not revoke someone on parole unless they commit a new crime. So let's say, and typically then, once they do commit a new crime, they won't send them back to prison unless they're sentenced on that new crime. So even if they commit a new crime, they're still sitting in our county jail. That's why our county jail is so populated right now. Instead of being in a state prison, they're sitting in our county jail on your tax dollars, county tax dollars, not your state tax dollars. It's just shuffling it around. Unfortunately, I believe it costs more for it to be housed here than it would at state in a prison, but I guess the justice doesn't believe so. We're really at the county level getting squeezed from both sides. They've determined that the city should be filing less and the prison should be taking less, so that's leaving it on the county.
So what's the right thing to do?
The right thing to do is to seek justice and do what the law tells us to do. I mean,
So how, it's gotta be changed through the legislation.
The right thing to do is, if someone is sentenced to 7 years, they should, truth in sentencing is honestly what should happen. If most people, whenever I have this conversation and say, if someone does 7 years, what do you think they're gonna do? Unless you have some knowledge, most people think that they're just gonna do 7 years, not 15% of that time. If the state wants to change what that is, then change it. Instead of just this kind of hidden, well, we're just gonna parole them out and leave it up to the communities to decide. It shouldn't just be that, it should just be what it is. But we don't have that system. I don't know how to fix it, but I
We
just
we
work
also don't
with,
have enough prison space to do it.
we don't have enough prisons. I think that is not the goal. The goal is not to build more prisons. We don't have the money, is what I'm told. So, I don't know how to fix it, I just deal with what I have.
Starting school.
That was, alright, so that was kind of my job in a nutshell. I know I kind of went through it fast. I can go over basically, if anyone has any questions. I cannot speak to any specific cases, like Jan talked about earlier. But I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes?
I got one.
Raise
So-
your hands and I'll try to get them in order.
So you said that the Missouri Supreme Court basically made its own law, so if that's unconstitutional, then why are you guys abiding by it?
I didn't say it was unconstitutional.
Well, but if they can't make laws.
They can make Missouri Supreme Court rules that affect the courts. And that's what we have to abide by, is rules that govern the courts. The legislature can override that
They
by
did.
passing a law. And they haven't.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Their rules
It
govern
does.
what we do.
Yeah.
We call that judicial legislation.
Yes.
So mine isn't so much a question as more of a statement and a suggestion to things. I take some of the criminal case things that you said personal because I was attacked in 2013. He tried to kill me. When he made it to court, everything he was charged with, that he should have been charged with, was pled down to slap on the wrist crimes. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. He was out in a year and a half. One of the biggest problems why these men and women, which women not as much because the women's prison systems are better in certain aspects, but one of the biggest reasons why these men get out of prison and all they know how to do is to commit more crimes is because when they get put into prison, they're taught better crimes by bigger and better criminals. They're not offered anything beyond getting a GED in there. They're not offered life skills. They're not taught how to balance a checkbook. They're not taught how to keep up with bills and do life. They are taught how to commit better and bigger crimes. That's part of the problem. That is part of the problem.
Go ahead.
You said that you're not allowed to have any type of investigations.
That's correct. Yes, our office does not investigate any crimes.
So I have a question. You have one investigator. What does he do?
Yeah, so good question, because frequently even law enforcement thinks that our investigator should be the one investigating their crimes and following up on certain crimes. Our investigator, let's say that we have to subpoena someone into court or get a witness, he will go investigate and find where that person is and bring them into court for us. Or let's say that I've got to figure out release evidence, and I've got to determine whether or not I can do that. It's more of a research tool for us. So Mark Majoris is my investigator. He was former assistant police chief of Cape Girardeau Police Department for many years. Great resource tool for my office. He's kind of the liaison for the law enforcement officers in the different agencies. But you will never see where he is the actual investigator for a specific crime. He's more of a Mark, I need you to go and research whether or not this gun belongs to that person, so I can release it after the case is already over. This case is on appeal. Can you go and collect that evidence from this agency so I can send it off to the Attorney General's office? So that's kind of his role in the office, but not to actually investigate crimes. So, good question though. Honestly, law enforcement doesn't understand that. They always think that he can be the one Maybe we should change his title, but,
So I got a quick question.
where
If
we at?
legalized
Yeah.
marijuana, how's that affected everything? Like, the argument always was if we legalize it, then there won't be so many people in jail and on and on and on. How is that, what's the outcome of that so far?
So, medical marijuana is now legalized. Honestly, we do not see a lot of individuals that have medical marijuana cards. So, and maybe the reason why I don't see it is if law enforcement does a pretty good job of screening that themselves, and that's why I don't see it. But we still do file cases for if you have marijuana without a medical marijuana card, that's still illegal. So as far as that hasn't changed anything. I think as far as the sentencing aspect of that, that's really up to the judges. We do, I think, I believe it's a lesser sentence though, as far as what it used to be. I think that it's less, certainly we don't see as much prison sentences or even jail sentences, more fines related to marijuana than what we've had in the past. Now, that all depends on whether or not, let's say, that individual, it's a violent crime, they happen to also have marijuana on them, you have 4 charges, it's the 4th charge, that person might get sentenced to the maximum on that year in the county jail. Well, you gotta look at that to say, okay, well, they also got sentenced to 4 years in the Department of Corrections. The 1 year was as a result of the totality of the circumstances. So you'll see some of those outliers, but if it's simply just, he got pulled over, he had marijuana on his person, most of the time that would be a D misdemeanor. The maximum punishment of that is a fine. And honestly, we typically would amend that to a paraphernalia charge. So.
Why?
Just plea bargaining.
Tell us about plea bar, I'm sorry,
No, that's
there's
one
other
order.
people, yeah.
That's one order. Go ahead.
So plea bargaining, as she was mentioning, is it happens in almost the majority of our cases, and that's as a result of just, like I said, the sheer amount of cases that we file. If we don't plea bargain, can you imagine if we had that many trials? It would be a broken system. So to get people to plead guilty, we offer things below the maximum. For marijuana, we would, depending on someone's criminal history. Now, if their criminal history is something that we would not, let's say, even if they have multiple possession of controlled substance with marijuana, we probably wouldn't amend it down to just simple paraphernalia. It's the same range of punishment, it's a D misdemeanor. It's just really what they're pleading guilty to. And the fine amount, we would ask for increased fine amount, but.
In regards to domestic assault cases, have you seen a market increase in those since the COVID lockdowns?
So what was interesting is I tried to run the numbers during COVID year on just all the cases. I had it somewhere. So all the time people want to know what happened during COVID. So during that year, we filed, so typically we would file around 4,000 cases a year. During the height of COVID, we did see a large decline in the amount of cases that we filed. We filed 1,600 cases.
For domestic assault?
No. Total cases.
Okay, so.
I did not run the actual specific cases for domestic assault. I will tell you this, that out of that 1,600 cases that we filed, the majority of those were as a result of law enforcement getting called to a scene and actually referring that to us. They weren't being proactive about cases. What I mean by that, they weren't just running radar, shooting something and making a stop. They were kind of under a directive to not just go seek cases because of COVID. So if there was a domestic assault that occurred, they would go to it. But honestly, I don't think that there was any more as a result of people being confined into the homes. Now, what we do see is that there's around the month of December and January, colder months, we do see a rise in domestic assaults where people are at home. Now, a lot of people say that that's because people are cooped up at home. Other people say that's the pressure of Christmas, making sure there's money to buy presents. We do see a lot more domestic assaults around that time period. Just like probably in the next month, whenever it hits around 90 degrees, we will see a lot more crime. Probably double the amount of crime that we would in any other months. It's nicer outside, people are going out, having fun, drinking. So those are the two biggest months, or whenever it hits around 90 degrees outside. So.
You answered some of that. I was wondering about COVID effects. I guess what kind of COVID effects that COVID have in the jails, and I have heard of this First Step Act. I don't know if that's state or just federal. Do you know what that is?
I've never even heard of that. But in the jail, so again, the Supreme Court had their rules where basically we were not to have any hearings that weren't essential. So what that did was we basically just punted cases for many months. If someone was in custody, then we had their bond hearings. That was about it. We didn't have cases, we didn't have trials, we didn't have hearings. We just kind of, it clogged the system. It took a lot of time before we were able to really get to where it was pre-COVID. I think we're there now. Charlene, do you feel that way? I think it's kind of gotten back to where we were pre-COVID. It feels that way, but during that time period, it was rough. It was like a ghost town. But we still filed the cases that were referred to us. So.
Discretionary prosecution.
Yes.
Every prosecutor has that. And a good example is your cohort in St. Louis, Kim Gardner.
Yes.
Who, it works both ways. She chose to go after Eric Greitens and
Right.
got censured by the bar, I think, and had to back off. But she also chose not to prosecute a bunch of people on the street committing felonies
Right.
during the violence. So for you, Mark, you have to do discretionary prosecution. Kind of what's your principle about that? What do you choose not to go after, or what do you especially go after?
So there's no real good, we're going after this, we're not going after that. Honestly, if you're breaking the law, we're gonna file it, we're gonna seek justice, we're gonna follow the law. Unfortunately, this job is hard. We're going to make people upset.
Which is why you're elected.
Yes. If we're not making people upset, we're not doing our jobs. We've got law enforcement that, like I told you, they, in all their probable cause statements, will send over what they think that we should file. Well, they're gonna send over, that they want us to file 5-6 different counts on every case. To be honest, we're not gonna do that, but they want us to. So then we're probably gonna plead their case down. They want the maximum. Victims, most likely are going to be upset with us because, again, we didn't get the maximum on certain cases. The defendant, we filed charges against them. So that's, like I said, 3,500, 4,000 people a year that obviously they're gonna hate my guts because I put them in jail or trying to send them to prison. Then they probably hired an attorney, so double that with the amount of attorneys that think that we're out to get them. So it's never, what I try to tell my assistant prosecutors and my staff is, as long as we try to do the right thing and follow the law, then we can justify it, be consistent, and I think we do a good job of that. I think that that's kind of been passed down from the different prosecutors in Cape County. I try not to have changed much from what has been done in the past as far as, I mean, it's not that we seek to find this case or we don't file that case. If a case is referred over to us, then we will review it, and if the law is broken, then we will file it accordingly.
Mark, you mentioned getting cases from DHSS. I
Yeah.
can't even imagine. Can you give an example of what kind of case you would get from there?
So they will go into senior citizens that might have someone that have someone stealing from them.
Oh, okay.
So an elder abuse case.
Okay. Well, to take this further, and this is kind of hearsay that I've heard, and maybe you can clarify your position, but when our Cape Girardeau County Health Department put out their mandate in July of 2020 with the mask wearing and the $1,000 fine and year in jail for non-compliance, I heard, maybe from the grapevine, that you chose that you would not be their, you would not prosecute, you would not be their brown shirt or whatever, you would not enforce that mandate. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, you're accurate on that. I mean, I even told the newspaper that we weren't gonna file those
Okay.
cases. I didn't think that it was enacted appropriately.
That's discretionary enforcement.
So, but I don't think that, I think it was simply how they failed to enact it properly. There were some issues with that, but.
Okay. So, well, as it is, I want to say thank you. I mean, first of all, that's a mandate and not really a law, so we citizens are pretty confused on how that all works, especially when it gets to you. If we refuse to wear a mask, can you enlighten us on that and take it further and say, in my opinion, they're going to come down with it again. We are not done. This is going to rev up. It's already revving up in other parts of the country. The CDC just told Biden and the airplanes they have to wear the masks again today, I think. So this is coming around. So I don't even know what to ask of you except to say how can we depend on having our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness in Cape Girardeau County when that kind of thing is hanging over us?
I mean, I don't really know what your question is, because right now, it's all hypothetical, not
Okay, did we
anything,
learn
not-
anything? Did we learn anything from July 2020? And actually, okay, I can get a little more specific. You said they didn't do it right. So what would they do that would make it right?
I didn't think they had the authority to do it.
Ever?
There you go.
I mean, I agree with you, but when this comes around again, then there's, are you saying there's no way that they could make
I've
a
thought
mandate
several
right?
things have been that stuff.
They can't.
You hear it here first.
I don't know what you're asking. Is it,
Okay, well, you said you didn't think they did it right,
okay?
right? Did I hear you say that right?
Your question is what is right?
Yeah, so are you saying there's a way that the tyrants in the health department can do it right and restrict our liberty?
Well, you're asking me like a big hypothetical on situations that haven't occurred yet. I mean,
Okay, well, help me out here, guys.
I'm trying to prepare you for what's coming.
We are not gonna comply. If they come down with a mandate again, we will not comply, so what can we expect from you?
It's not constitutional, so.
It's not a law.
What's your question?
In the future, do you plan to file charges if you are pressed upon by higher authorities?
To wear a mask.
Even though it is against our constitutional rights, are you prepared to stand up to them higher authorities and say, back off, I have this, that's unconstitutional, we're not gonna go there? That's what she's asking.
From what authority?
The federal government that thinks they have reach.
The Cape County Health Department.
So we're speaking about hypotheticals though.
But it's already happened.
It
It's not
happened in July
hypothetical.
2020. So let's just say it, they're revving up to do it right now. Let's just hypothetically say they're coming out with that mandate next week. What can we expect from you?
The same mandate?
Yes.
Let's start there.
Then no.
Okay.
But I can't really speak to hypotheticals that I don't know the facts in the future. I mean,
You're like a judge at the being questioned in Congress.
How
They
about
can't
this?
say
How
what
about
if.
this?
You
help
have to
enforce-
stick
you
to
help
your
enforce them the first
decisions.
time. Are you gonna enforce them again if they do it again?
I didn't help them the first time.
It's enforced in your courthouse.
Yeah.
I got thrown out because of it.
Me too.
And your officers didn't like being handed a constitution either.
Okay, so one, that's a Missouri Supreme Court rule. It's not my courthouse.
Okay.
So who throwed you out?
The bailiff on the judge saying so.
So that's a judge, and it's a bailiff.
I wanna add, there was 5 other people in the courtroom not wearing a
Okay.
Not
mask.
wearing them.
Not
Because they
wearing
work
a
for the
mask,
court.
and I was the
Again,
one asking.
so Missouri Supreme Court
Well, you can't
rule
answer this stuff. No.
and the bailiff.
That's not giving me any justification.
That's not my office. That's not my officers.
Okay, I kind of think that might be muddying the waters from where I was a
So
little
I'm
bit.
not enforcing a mandate.
That's correct.
Right.
That's, so he can't do
Well,
it.
you got that.
I'm,
But
your
any place can
your
say you
question
have to
would
come
be then
anywhere
with
this
Judge
is what
Lipke, the
I'm
presiding
That's
judge,
that.
that's his
No
order.
No shirt, no service.
Not,
Right. A business can
Yes.
legally.
Right.
I get it, I get it.
Okay.
Yeah, he is.
Because it is the
It's-
Supreme Court, it's Missouri Supreme Court.
right, I have no
So that was
authority on the
sheriff's
courthouse.
question that should have been asked a couple weeks
So
ago.
that should have been a question for the sheriff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
or the presiding judge, so the presiding judge, who actually, that's his order, or the sheriff, that's her officers.
Yeah.
I have no say. I didn't file charges against you.
Like I told her, she's one of the most powerful people in this county. When she was here.
I've got.
Sorry, like I told her, she's
Okay,
one of the most powerful people in this county.
I'll follow up with one more thing. So, I can see where a future mandate would probably go, and that is how it ended up this last year, is that
I'll
they-
say this, it would have to come from the state legislature.
a law,
A law.
Yes.
okay. I can live I think, with that. That's better than nothing. So, but then what happened with even our Cape Girardeau County mandate was then nobody actually arrested anybody for not wearing a mask. They arrested, or they charged people because of trespassing for not wearing a mask.
To get around it. Yeah, one of the Department of Health board members.
So that's a whole nother animal, and I mean, I don't know what you can say to that, but that's a loophole that shouldn't be.
Do you have a question? Or is it a comment?
Yes, UFC code, 360 BBB, it concerns EUAs, emergency use authorization. And it specifies, the law says that all EUAs, and that's everything COVID, from tests, vaccines, procedures, everything is EUA. And that is subject to that code 360 BBB. And it says that it's got 3 issues that it addresses. One is, has to go through the board, the health board. But when they do, the second thing, requirement is that they have to tell you if they are wanting to require it, they have to specify what the pros and cons are. Hasn't been done. Nobody does that. Third thing is, it has to be optional because of Nuremberg history and trials. Medicine cannot force that on people, and it's experimental.
He's right.
And it's emergency use authorization. That's masks. It is subject to that law, and that's a law, but I haven't heard anything about it outside of the internet. Nobody's enforced it or pushed it or said anything about it.
Defended us
The
because
truckers
of
are,
it.
that's one of the things we're fighting right now, is that exact thing.
And that's the law.
Terry, go ahead. Okay, I know most of you here, I am a social worker, state of Missouri, so you're in our office quite frequently.
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't had to be in a conference room together, but it's coming. Now I wear a different hat at work, but as a citizen, I wanna talk about what you spoke on the statistics of the women and the domestic. And I just wanna make everybody aware that I'm sitting in a seat and I'm talking as a social worker in child support. And I'm talking with these women that went through COVID, that felt like they had nowhere to go. You're seeing more cases starting to be filed, right? They're coming across my desk because now these women are either because the state of Missouri tells them if your children are on Medicaid, right? You have to open a child support case. So you can either forego the child support and make it get a medical only. Basically, the parents share 50-50 whatever Medicaid doesn't pay. Right now, Medicaid pays for everything. The system actually doesn't even reinvestigate people right now. I see all day, renewed for COVID, all day long. We are not allowed to sanction people for anything. So there's no end in sight on that side of it. And us as taxpayers, we're gonna pay for this for a long time.
We're already paying for it.
That's right. So these women, what's happening is they're calling me. I have we all have alpha cases, okay? They're calling me going, oh my God, why did I get this paperwork? I don't want child support. I'm like, why don't you want child support? Because he's already tried to kill me 3 times. They're scared. And I had a case yesterday, not in this county, no names, but she was pregnant, barely held on to the baby. He dragged her along the side of the car. Then him and his son came back in and raped her other biological young women in the home. I have to talk to his probation and parole officer, right? He did a short amount of time. And I talked to her, is he getting a job? Is he working? Well, they're supposed to. Again, it's not being enforced. You can only do so much, but as a community, we need to know where some of these these mostly women, I'm not trying to be prejudiced here, are coming from. They are scared, they're trying to hang on, they're trying to take care of their kids, they're trying to work a job and stay hidden from some of these men because they were stuck. They lost their jobs, their kids weren't in school, they didn't have babysitters, so they felt stuck. And they took this abuse and they didn't report it. And now they're starting to either A, report it, or being forced by the state on the child support to make it either a medical or child support only. So I think you'll start seeing the numbers climb.
So Terry, do you have a question for the prosecutor?
My question is, it was going back to when the rules changed on probation and parole. I want to be enlightened on that more. Is there a bill that I can look at so I'm more informed?
No, that was an appointment by the governor. Each governor gets to appoint the director of probation and parole, and the director of probation and parole gets to set their guidelines.
Okay.
There you go. All right. Any other questions we have here? Raise your hand if you have a question. I'll bring you the mic.
All right, Mark, you are a Cape native, and you're a Christian by faith. You're a father and a husband and a citizen, and you are our elected prosecutor. So I just want to ask you to be objective for a minute and I know you think about these things, but step back and look at our county and the two big cities, of course. What do you see, given your experience now in the law, as our major, most difficult problem or problems?
Poverty and drug use, methamphetamine, the youth. I think that the majority of violent crimes that our office sees are driven by poverty, driven by controlled substances that then forces the youth in our community to, it's a different youth than what I grew up with. It's a different youth that I represented even 8 years ago. The violent crimes that we see now are kids 19 to 24. The majority of them are, they have guns. And that's, I don't know the mentality. I don't know how to fix it. All I see is what we see, and we see a lot of methamphetamine. That's kind of the drug of our community. I get frequently asked whether or not we see heroin, cocaine. That's
Fentanyl?
Fentanyl's, I maybe filed 10 cases of fentanyl, where I filed 10 cases of methamphetamine a week.
Wow.
10 cases of fentanyl a year. So it's not saying that fentanyl's not out there, but whenever, we just don't see it. Now, whenever you do go into larger communities, even probably up north, that's definitely, heroin's even in Perry County, but it doesn't make its way down here. But it's definitely the youth. Something needs to happen at home with the youth. So
we're still calling it, I'm sorry. We're still calling it methamphetamines, but you know that it's not methamphetamines anymore.
It's a concoction. So if you actually look at the statute and the definition of methamphetamine, there's probably, I don't even know how many derivatives of it, but when we do the lab on it, it has to be some type of form of methamphetamine that is in there for it to be. It's all coming through Mexico, through China, but that's kind of the source, where if you really want to, where majority of ours comes through Oklahoma City. That's where our source comes from, so.
Wow, that's interesting. Oklahoma City, wow.
I don't know, I mean, that's kind of the trade route of the methamphetamine.
Coming out of Mexico.
So Mark alluded to the fact that these, it's getting younger and younger, and you guys, it's the demise of the family, right? And it's the loss of our morals and religious people. And we have to raise these children up from the home. We've already talked about this. It's a continuum. We have another question back here for you, sir.
First of all, I was going to say thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you.
And, and the last statement that you said, when you said you don't know how to fix it, it's a community issue, okay? And like you said, from the family, but is there an opportunity? And I guess what I want to ask is, do you know what department to look to if we could set up something for those who have been arrested, those who are coming out of jails? I'd like to start on the other end before you even get there. But having something set up where people are taught moral character within the home. It's not something just to say, we have to teach it. The programs were taken out a long time ago. I think they should be there for those, it should be a requirement for those who are leaving the penal system to be able to take courses and classes and how to acclimate themselves back into society. And also prior to that, I'm going back into the school systems. When you took all forms of righteousness out of the schools, they got rid of everything. Now we're getting critical trash put into schools, right? And you're talking about what you see now, and I guarantee your numbers are gonna be higher real soon if this stuff is allowed to permeate. So I think we have to find a way to teach our children early in these schools, because by the time they get to you, they failed. The system has failed them. Okay? So again, my original question is there a way that you guys can work it into your system? Not just a parole, not just
So I think what you're speaking to is kind of a drug court system, which we have that program. Treatment court programs.
No. Moral character program.
Well,
that will cover everything, not just drugs, domestic abuse.
Right, but that type of program, but changing that to allow for other programs, and honestly, it's just funding. And
can you explain that?
So,
yeah. They're not.
So treatment court programs are when someone is sentenced to probation, it's already been their second, third time on probation, they're gonna fail. Then there's a treatment court program, that's Judge Lipke who runs that treatment court program. Drug court sometimes is what it's called, DWI court's another one, family court. So, I mean, it's an intensive program. It's really just resources, the amount of time taken away just to be able to run it. Where you need more people to be able to run it. Right now, it's probably at capacity for the people that we put into that program. So by what I mean funding, I mean if we want to put more people in it, we need more people to be able to run it.
Okay, all right, well, thank you.
But that, I mean, I would love to be able to have more of that, because the only way to fix it is to actually work on the problem, like with possession of controlled substance. If we don't fix the actual addiction, then we're just gonna keep on sending them in prison. So that treatment court is a way to fix it. But right now, like I said, I think we're at capacity. So we're turning people away left and right. And we don't have enough treatment facilities here. So.
I guess I was more geared towards preventive treatment. Thank you.
Yeah, and unfortunately, my role, I can't, until they commit a crime, I'm not involved. So.
We need to bring it back to the churches, right?
Right.
So you said a word earlier, proactive, right?
Right.
Okay. There's also a word called reactive. They can hear me. So, why are we being reactive as a city in Cape with the drugs, the gangs and everything else? Why are we being reactive and not proactive? What's the 5-year plan? What's the 2-year plan? What's the, let's get the gangs out, let's get this out of here. If it takes keeping them in jail and not.
So I think you're asking me a question that's probably
So
more.
you're working, wait a minute, no, you can't get out that easy. So you're working with the cops, okay? So you're working with the police department real close, you said.
Right.
So my question is, if we do not have a proactive plan, that in 1 year, what is our goal? In 2 years, what's our goal? In 5 years, what's our goal? And we're working towards that goal. And whatever it takes, then all you're gonna do is status quo. All you're gonna do is just keep the same things. And we can all sit around here and say, we don't have money, we don't have this, but you have to do something different if you want a different result. So the other thing is, you know exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about the mask mandates and everything else. This is all the crunch. This is all a crunch that this government, that these people are putting down on us. And this is causing a lot of this stuff. The government's not here to help, that's for sure. So what we're asking you is pull off your cap, say, of, prosecutor, and help us to understand, what we can do to help, what we can do, what goals we should set to try to figure this thing out and help you, and to help ourselves, and then, to, I guess you'd call it, move forward in this, in all these things. The thing is, sickness will never end, but I'm not gonna wear a mask the rest of my life. You know what I'm saying? So we're sitting here and we're going, we're common law-abiding citizens here. We're not Jesse James. You're dealing with Jesse James. We're not
Okay,
there.
I'm gonna go ahead and stop you for just a minute, because we all hear each other. We're here in the same room, and we get that. But he's our prosecutor, and I hear what you're saying 100%. But you guys, that's why we're meeting here every week, is because we the people have the power, and this is a moral, ethical issue. What Mark is by the time it gets to Mark, what is that 16-year-old or that 17-year-old child? What have they been through? What have they seen? This goes back to where the churches have failed. And we could go on and on down that road. I'm sorry, Mark, I didn't give you a chance to respond to that, but you guys, that's why we're meeting. People don't even know that the power is within them. These parents don't know, and we have generations that don't even know how to raise children, right? So it's going to take prayer. It's going to take the churches waking up. It's going to take that to move forward. Go ahead, and then we're done with questions. Go ahead, Mark.
All right. So, what's your specific question? There was a lot of.
I don't play those games. You know exactly what I'm saying.
No, I don't know what your specific question is.
The game is not that we don't understand your positions that you're in and things like that. That's what we understand. What we're not getting from anyone is, how do we fix this? How do we solve it? What can we do? Because we're sitting here, we're saying, we don't like this. This status quo, this, Kate
I don't
wasn't
have
known
your
for
answers to
guns.
fix.
You know what I mean? Shootings and everything else. So what I'm saying is there some sort of plan? Are we just reactive? Is that what our government officials? Because everything you're talking.
Okay, we're gonna let him answer, and we're gonna move on, so we're not here all night.
Can I answer his question in a nutshell?
Okay.
It didn't happen overnight.
Right.
It did not happen overnight, and you're not gonna see it get fixed overnight.
That's exactly right.
And it's gonna be slow. We gotta go back to the very beginning. We gotta go back to the schools, we gotta go back to the school boards, to the councils, everything that we've been neglecting for all these years.
That's
We gotta
right.
get back to those places and start over.
100%.
Then we gotta start from that point taking care of business
Yes.
and holding people accountable.
Yes.
That's the only way you can fix it.
It's exactly what our founders
There's no other
intended.
magic bullet.
Okay, so I have one other sorry, you guys, it's getting late and we
Yeah.
stopped this at 7 o'clock, we got things to do. There's one other question, we have a box back there for people to put questions in, and it says, how is the coroner in his position when he falsified his address on the application?
To my knowledge, that was referred to the Attorney General's office, so.
Ask him.
Eric Schmidt needs to be asked.
Okay, and the second question is the Cape County coroner a full-time job, which it is?
That is a full-time job that's elected every 4 years. That would be up for election, not this cycle, but the next. So in 2024. Correct.
And do you know if he's here, let's see, and if so, how is it that he's also working at a funeral home outside of Cape County?
You're asking me questions that I don't know that, yeah, I don't even know if he is or if he isn't. I don't know. That's not my office. That's another elected official. I would invite you to invite him here and see if he comes, and you can ask him those questions himself.
Well, I schedule all kinds of people, so here we go.
Well, we appreciate you, Mark.
Thank you. So
We
just
appreciate you.
Thanks for being here.
And we
Thanks for your
appreciate,
time.
you understand our frustration, and it wasn't directed at you.
I
We
understand.
appreciate you very much.
Right. So thank you, Mark Welker. Okay, so we have attendance prize.